Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome classical game. It's from the 36th European Club Cup and it's between Aryan, Tari and Daniil Dubov. It features, many great moves as often chess games do, but one very particular one and it's also the reason why I decided to show this game. Another is since so many of you guys are requesting Dubov's games, but the actual reason is this one move. So let's check it out and see what this game is about. So Tari with the white pieces opens with e4, and this is the match between Alkaloid and Overspiel. Tari and Dubov are playing board 2. So e4, we have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and the bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have a6, Morphy's defense from Dubov, bishop to a4, and now knight to f6. We have castles by Tari and bishop to c5, going for the Neo-Arkhangelsk's variation. We have c3, b5 chasing the bishop back, bishop to c2, and now the immediate d5. Dubov doesn't mess around, he wants to open up the center right away, and Tari replies with the strongest reply and the most often played one, and that is d4. So a lot of tension in the center, and you can go about this many ways, but the most usual way is just d captures on e4. So here we have knight captures on e4. If you remember in the St. Louis Rapid this year, Nakamura defeated Caruana with d captures on e5. But okay, here we have knight captures on e5, knight captures on e5, d captures on c5 now. Grabbing the bishop, and now there are a couple of games that reach this position, but the most common move here is just knight to d3. It makes sense, you have very nice setup here. If the bishop captures, you will have a pass pawn here on d3. So this is what everyone plays. Mamedyarov played it, Levon Aryan played it, but the move, I believe, in top tier play never yielded more than a draw. So instead of this knight to d3, Dubov chooses a move that has been never been played before, and he plays bishop to b7. So of course it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game, and this is where things can go very wrong for white. So bishop to b7, I believe, is a bluff. It's a very well researched bluff, of course, from Dubov, where if white continues in the best possible way, Dubov will of course just have nice fighting chances, and nothing seriously will happen to him. Of course, white will have to spend a little bit more time. The thing is, white doesn't want to capture with the queen, because then rook captures and then black has the rook on the open d file, and you're just helping black develop. But the truth is, if you capture with the queen and then rook captures, bishop to f4 is very, very annoying. The knight is hanging. If the knight moves, the c7 pawn is hanging, and there really is no good move to just solidify here. If you play something like this, this is a very clunky position. It's just very, very weird. White can play a4, and already black is without any good moves. There's just nothing for black to be done here. It's a really, really bad position for black. So what you would have to do if the queens get traded off, queen captures, you would have to capture with the king. And now this is a much different game than if rook captures and bishop comes to f4. Now bishop to f4 isn't really doing anything, since the king already defends the c7 pawn. You can just move the knight, and if you just continue knight to d2, then black also just continues with knight to d3 and so on. So this is what Tari kind of should have gone for, but after bishop to b7, it seems he trusted the Dubov, and he played bishop to g5. And okay, Dubov says, all right, I tricked you again, let's try again. One more time. So he plays h6, and again, queen captures is the way to go. If you play queen captures, again, king has to capture, because if rook captures, we're still going to play bishop to f4, and the same ideas apply here. So instead, after h6, we have bishop captures on f6 by Tari, and now queen captures on f6. And now this is a much different position than if the queens get traded off the board, because now this is a beautiful pawn. The knight still can jump to d3, maybe even to f3 in some lines. The bishop is just a monster here, and how can white continue here? Queen to e2, maybe a way to go after the pawn right away, but Tari chooses rook to e1. Still, the idea is the same. We want to eliminate this pawn, but now Dubov plays rook to d8, attacks the queen, queen to e2, and now the position is very delicate, but there is one move that gives Dubov incredible advantage. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this incredible idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on not doing anything weird like knight to f3 or knight to d3. I know you guys were looking at those moves, but one thing you might have seen is that the king is still in the center of the board. So the main move here to achieve great advantage for black is to just castle. This is what Dubov played, so congratulations to everyone who found this. You are an excellent spotter of very natural moves in complicated positions. So what do you do here? Well, obviously we want to capture this pawn, but if we do this, let's say we play bishop captures on e4, black can just recapture, queen captures, and now knight to d3 just wins the game for black. The rook is hanging, and also queen captures on f2 is now being threatened. So we have to defend this. Let's say we play rook to f1. Now comes rook f to e8. And what do you do with the queen? Queen f3, but now we just trade. Captures, captures, we pick up the b2 pawn, and black's position is just too dominant. White really has no moves here. Your rooks are disconnected. There's no good way to develop the knight. You can't go to d2, you can't go to c3. If you play knight to a3 or something like that, then the rooks really come down the board with rook to d1, rook to e2, and it's just a complete mess of a position. Yes, the material is equal for the moment, but white has 4 pawn islands. He has a double c pawn, a double f pawn, and this will be some very easy and pleasant work for black's rooks. So that's what's happening if you capture the pawn here. So we have knight to d2 by Tari, now developing a little bit before recapturing, but now knight to d3. Of course, we're not going to wait with this. We have bishop captures e captures on d3, attacking the queen, and now queen to e3. The f3 square is no longer available. The bishop covers that. So queen to e3, queen to e5, offering a queen trade right away is, of course, a possibility, but black would, of course, decline this with queen to c6 and going for checkmate. So queen to e3 here by Tari, and now rook f to e8 by Dubov. And now you really don't have a good move for the queen. If you play something like queen to g3 to always keep an eye on the g2 square, it doesn't really matter. Rook to e2. We just go after the knight. If you capture here, then we have this beautiful pass pawn on e2. We open up our d file for the rook, and this is just winning for black. And if you play rook a to d1, you try and defend the knight, then just queen to e7. Threatening rook captures on e1, and if rook f1, then just, let's say, rook to e6, and now there's, well, white is just struggling so much at some point that there will be no more moves for white. Rook to g6 is coming, the g2 pawn will be attacked, bishop queen captures on c5 is coming, just winning a pawn, and black will always be left with this beautiful passed d3 pawn. So Tari says, alright, I'm not playing that game, let's just give up the queen for 2 rooks and see what happens. So captures, captures, and captures with check, king to h7, and now rook back to e3, keeping an eye on the d3 pawn, but also always having the option of going rook to g3 if the queen threatens checkmate. So here we have queen to g5, preventing this. Now if rook to g3, we just pick up the knight here. So instead we have knight to f3. g3 is also an option, but you kind of don't want to play this, opening up even more your king's position, because then you might really get checkmated. So instead we have knight to f3, attacking the queen, but here Dubov just trades. We have captures, captures, and now queen to d2. Now yes, it's 2 rooks against the queen, but this queen has now infiltrated white's position, and it's going to be very, very difficult to defend pretty much anything here. You could play something like rook to b1 to try and defend this pawn, just queen c2. We kick the rook away, then we pick up this pawn, this pawn, this pawn, and we win a very nice game. Or we just push d2, and we don't even have to pick up the pawns. So instead, after queen to d2, we have rook captures on f7. Tari starts going after some pawns, and now c6, defending the c7 pawn. You don't want to give white a pass pawn just too early. Rook to d7, and now a5. Dubov is postponing capturing the pawn here, or even just a queen to c2. He wants to keep this rook on a1 for as long as possible. So here we have h4, a4 by Dubov, and now h5. So grabbing more space here. If you can somehow get this rook into the attack at some point, you might get at least a draw. And now, like I said, queen captures on b2, of course, possible at any time, but then you really want to keep this rook here for as long as possible. So here, queen to c2 first, and now comes rook to d6. Tari goes after the c6 pawn. Now comes d2. And now we are threatening a lot of very nasty ideas, like queen to c1 with check. So rook to f1, so you don't have to capture the queen, but you still keep an eye on the d1 square twice. But now queen captures on b2. We have rook captures on c6. Now Tari also has a passed pawn. Queen captures on a2. We have rook to d6, now ready to push the passed pawn while keeping an eye on the passed d pawn, and the queen to c2 now. We have c6, just queen captures on c3, so keeping an eye on that pawn. Rook to d1, this pawn is now going to fall, but now a3. Dubov has two more passed pawns that he's ready to push. And now rook captures on d2. If you play something like rook, the other rook captures on d2 to kind of keep an eye on your pawn, black just starts pushing, and you can never push your pawn because, well, first you have to defend this square. So Tari tries it with the 6th rank rook. We have rook 6 captures on d2, and now queen captures on c6. We have rook to d6 attacking the queen, queen to c2. Now we have a repetition here. Rook attacks the queen, queen to a4 now, and now of course Dubov is ready to start pushing his passed pawns. Rook to a1, b4, and now rook d to a2, not allowing b3 because then we capture the a3 pawn. So king to g8. Now it's time to start bringing the king into the game. g3, king to f7, we have king to h2, and now king to f6. We have f4, and now queen to d7. And now, what do you play here with white? Well, you kind of have to keep the rooks here if you don't want to allow b3, but then again, keeping the rooks there isn't going to help you all that much. So here we have rook to e2, but now just queen to d6. So what do you play here? The a3 pawn will now be protected when Dubov pushes b3. So king to h3. If you just repeat rook e to a2, it doesn't really matter. Queen d5, we go after the h5 pawn, and after g4, we just play queen to d3 or queen to f3. We attack these pawns. There's really nothing for white to do here. We're going to pick up all of those pawns, and then we're going to start pushing these pawns as well. So after queen to d6, king to h3, but now just b3. Now the pawns are unstoppable. Rook to e3 going after them, and now you could push b2, but that's gonna require you to work for your meal a little bit longer. So here Dubov just plays a2, and he says the b3 pawn is off limits. If you capture that, just queen to e6 check picks up the rook. So of course Tari cannot play this. He played f5 now, going for rook to e6 check to win the queen, but that has little effect as Dubov plays b2, and it was in this position on move 44 that Aryan Tari resigned the game, and what a great victory for Daniil Dubov. You could capture the queen here, yes, but then just b captures on a1, and then black gets another queen into the game, and of course it's all over. So really incredible game where other than Dubov using mind tricks here, there is no better explanation, I think, for what happened in this position after he played bishop to b7. So it's a new position, of course. Tari has to be aware that Dubov made the research, and who knows what he prepared for this game, and of course he thinks that Dubov knows every possible continuation after queen captures on d8. But it seems that other than this move, there really are no better moves, and especially this just allowing Dubov with bishop to g5, bishop captures, queen captures to get so much development in so rapidly. This is like he was feeding Dubov development. So really outstanding, and bishop to b7, a move that only a player like Dubov could play in such top tier competitions, I believe. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And not only did they win this game, but they also crushed the other team. These are the standings. As you can see, they won. Alkaloid won 5.5 to half, where only Magnus got a draw for his team against Mamedyarov. But even that was an incredibly fighting game. Mamedyarov had some chances, and he was better for the most of the game, but he just dropped it at some point, and it was enough for Magnus to get a draw. But it's very rarely that you will see a 6-0. That almost never happens. So even here, you see it was a 5.5 to half. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, as so many of you were requesting a nice Dubov game, and how nice for Dubov to create one for us with such a incredible move like bishop to b7. I would like to thank Shanti Chaganti, Matthias Binte, Federico Conte Lofredo, Zachary Bell, and Mike Pomerening for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and checking up on whatever else is happening in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.